Hi, my name is Maya and I'm 20 years old. I came out to myself when I was 14 and to the world when I was 16. Growing up in a small town, it was really difficult to find queer people that I could relate to. So I went online, and that's where I found the Gay Women channel. The Gay Women channel is a YouTube channel created by Sarah Rotella and Adriana DeLeonardo.
I'm Sarah and this is the very lovely Adriana.
They create content on and about being lesbians. They mostly do comedy and make lots of different kinds of videos, like advice, movie reviews, and skits like this one, The 6 Lesbians You'll Date Before You Die.
The softball player, the lipstick lesbian, the closeted lesbian, Drake girl, the feminist.
At the time that I came out, I loved the Gay Women channel, and it really made me feel more connected to the lesbian community. But as I grew older, I became more and more frustrated with the content they were creating. As I met more queer people and became more comfortable with myself, I began to notice all the ways that Sarah and Adriana seemed to be making comedy based on lesbian stereotypes. Stereotypes such as lesbians being unfashionable.
You are wondering why Sarah and I are dressed like we're about to go on a woodland adventure. It's because we're just dressed like lesbians.
Introverted.
I'm surprised that lesbians, either lesbian makes the first move.
You talk online for 3 to 6 months. You go on 10 to 15 dates. You meet friends and family.
Then maybe you make a move.
Maybe.
No, I haven't left my apartment in 3 days.
Or that all lesbians are codependent.
And another word for clingy lesbian is lesbian.
Or that all lesbians love sports and are really good at anything that guys do.
We love sports.
We own every video game console to date.
Even when they made a feature film that they promised would avoid all of the regular tropes of lesbian cinema, the characterization of the main character fell flat.
Honey, you are what do they call it, John?
100-footer.
You are 100-footer.
She was presented as masculine,
And you still didn't know that I was gay!
sloppy,
Oh, that's
unfashionable.
Yeah, her pant-top combination was just great, and then with the shoes, it just came together really nicely. You're right, I should have brought Levi.
Okay.
and
See the girl
socially
over by the tree?
inept.
Yeah.
Gay.
How can you tell that all the way from here?
I started to realize all of the ways that I had been putting myself in a box in the hopes of being read as queer. I thought I had to wear flannel and combat boots, like sports, and put on a tough persona. It wasn't until I came to Smith that I felt like I could present myself however I chose. So this got me thinking. What does it mean that when there are queer characters on screen, they're usually supporting characters or sidekicks, like in Shrill, Jane the Virgin, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or Santa Clarita Diet? And if even lesbian filmmakers are failing to create nuanced lesbian protagonists, to what extent does it harm the identity formation of young lesbians who are looking to find themselves in the media? To answer some of my questions, I decided to interview a few of my lesbian friends.
I came out to myself probably around 15-ish, and then to my family at 16.
I came out to myself when I was 9 or 10, and then I came out to the world in my first person when I was 13.
When I was 13 or so, I came out as bi. And then a few years later, I was like, no, I'm a lesbian.
I was 13 when I came out to myself, and I was 16 when I came out to my parents.
I'm from a really rural community in Vermont where it's just farmland everywhere, and there are a lot of lesbians.
Where I'm from, it's not that fun to be visibly queer.
I came from an environment where I was one of the only queer people I knew, so I kind of had the image of what lesbians were supposed to look like.
I, growing up, had lots of examples of just very agrarian, wear flannels, overalls, and are always dirty, wear giant cowboy boots and butches.
The only kind of idea I had was that you were either really masculine and wore beanies and flannels and were really butch, or you were on the opposite and were super hyper feminine, had long hair and wore bright lipstick, and had long nails.
I think that I was still leaning heavily towards femininity because that was more socially acceptable, even though I had accepted my lesbianism.
I was constantly just like trying to come out to people on the street and was not able to until I shaved my head.
I think at the time I felt like I could fit in, but I was going to like force myself.
Immediately like noticed people interpreting, like I wore the same clothes, I like held myself the same way, but interpreting it as so much more masculine as soon as I didn't have any hair. And people immediately, like I could tell, like people now know I'm queer.
I think that the way that I present myself definitely changed, and I think that was because there was a place of acceptance for that here, and that I no longer feel like I have to like shape myself to fit the male gaze much.
I started meeting other queer people and I realized that like there's no one or two right ways to be a queer woman, and you can be like, you don't have to choose just one thing. You can decide every day what you want to look like, and that's fine.
I felt like, I think, more free to kind of do whatever I wanted with my style.
Started experimenting more with trying to dress more androgynously and not being so hyper feminine all the time, and then obviously cut my hair and that like really changed how I my gender and sexuality presented as well. I think it's really harmful because it's really hard to be something that you can't see. So if you never see, you know, a version of yourself in media, it sends the message that you're not like real or you're not valued. So that like really affects like your mental health.
I think that there needs to be, just in general, more depictions of less stereotypically attractive lesbianism. And I think that there needs to be significantly more media representation about that, because like girls don't know that, and like girls in like middle school are like being bullied by their peers to shave, and like that doesn't need to happen, and that could change.
On queer shows, like I think about Pose a lot, there is a lot of room for nuance, and there is a lot of room for like inter-community discussions and like depictions of queerness that isn't like totally great or totally like a heteronormative model of queerness that's just like the standard like white middle class house with just like an extra man or extra woman like popped in.
It would be great if there were more gender non-conforming lesbians, etc. in the media, because like it's important for you to see that that's a route that you're able to take.
Like, the first movie I watched with lesbians in it was But I'm a Cheerleader.
The first lesbian movie I ever watched was Debs, which is like super hypersexualized.
Like that and like Blue is the Warmest Color, or like those kind of stereotypical lesbian movies.
I think it's getting better. Like I see it sort of happening.
Like, I don't know if you've seen One Day at a Time, or like Jane the Virgin has queer characters on it now.
One Day at a Time, and I think also mentioned Jane the Virgin.
So why do we have a lack of nuanced lesbian representation in the media, especially in leading roles? Well, according to Adorno and Horkheimer in their piece The Culture Industry, capitalist modes of mass production provide that media has to be sellable. So, including queer storylines threatens this by drifting from the mainstream. Because the culture industry commodifies cultural forms, meaning TV and film become something to profit off of, a standard is produced. To deviate from this standard by including queer characters in storylines resists the dominant ideologies that people have absorbed through the culture industry. And although shows like One Day at a Time and Jane the Virgin are subversive for including queer characters, Adorno and Horkheimer argued that the radical potential of such a move is diminished by the fact that these shows are beholden to the market. So let's go back to my original question. How do lesbian stereotypes affect identity formation? Well, let's begin by talking about what lesbian stereotypes actually are. First of all, according to Pierre Bourdieu on his piece The Forms of Capital, they constitute a form of cultural capital. Capital is the wealth that comes with how one engages in the world. Cultural capital is the social assets of a person, education, style, manner of speech within an economy of practices, and the accumulated knowledge of cultural capital leads to power and social status. To break it down even further, objectified cultural capital is what you know, and embodied cultural capital is what you do with what you know. Even though we can see how stereotypes are harmful to identity formation, the stereotypes that Adriana and Sarah use in Almost Adults and their other content are playing off of the objectified cultural capital of common lesbian stereotypes for comedic effect. As a result, that capital becomes embodied when young lesbians think they have to actually do things like wear flannel or play sports, etc. in order to be a lesbian. Embodying the cultural capital of lesbian stereotypes can help young lesbians know how to signal that they're queer, which can be especially helpful in rural areas where less people are usually out. In that case, lesbians are able to categorize themselves within the stereotypes that have been set up for them, i.e. lipstick lesbian, lumberjack lesbian, in order to signal their queerness to other queers. Kind of like how gay men used to signal their gayness by wearing one earring, putting keychains on a belt loop, or by having a certain color handkerchief. Now let's return to Almost Adults. What work is the film doing? And even if it's flawed, is any lesbian visibility at all a step in the right direction? Almost Adults is doing a couple of things. First of all, it's reinforcing a cultural narrative. Lesbians are masculine, sloppy, unfashionable, introverted, and out of touch. But, perhaps from the perspective of Sarah and Adriana, this characterization is funny. The comedy comes from the cultural capital that lesbians have, and in this case, we can all sit back and just laugh at ourselves. I mean, aren't some stereotypes based in truth after all? Finally, I want to discuss a queer futurity. How can the future of lesbian representation in the media improve and succeed in presenting more nuanced characters so that the young lesbians watching won't feel like they need to put themselves in a box in order to be valid? As Marjorie said, she imagines a future where lesbians don't need to fit a palatable mold, meaning middle class, nice house, and instead of a husband, there's just another woman popped in. Allison imagines a future where lesbians on screen aren't all conventionally attractive or cisgender. I imagine a future where we have more lesbian protagonists, not just best friends or sidekicks. And I imagine a future in which lesbian filmmakers make lesbian movies where the humor doesn't have to come at our own expense. What do you imagine?